Oh, I missed this last year. You know, fresh new bluebells, early mornings, absolutely fantastic. Of course, we just couldn't enjoy it like we can this year. So it's absolutely brilliant to get out here today, but what we're going to be talking about today, and we're in the ideal place for it, is colour. Colour in the landscape. What's accurate colour? What do we mean by it? And most importantly, how do we actually achieve it? How are we going to set our camera up to record these fantastic bluebells the best that we possibly can? As you can see behind me, the sun's coming up really quickly. I've got an idea for my first picture, so let's get that set up and we'll talk through how we're going to record the colour. I think bluebells are a wonderful subject. They sort of remind us, don't they, of the coming of new life, the coming of summer, warmer weather and everything. But even since the beginning of, well, say the beginning of photography, certainly the beginning of my photography, bluebells have always been a difficult thing to capture in terms of colour. In the days of film, there was always much debate at local camera clubs and in magazines and various groups of how difficult it was to get a good colour picture of a bluebell. But even before we start using the camera, there's a few things that we need to think about when it comes to colour photography. So before we set this camera up, we need to start thinking about such things as processing. I know it might be strange to think about processing first, but if we don't, we're going to make a few mistakes out in the field. So you need to set your processing software up, how it's going to manage colour, because you can match that inside your camera. So I use Adobe, I use Adobe Photoshop and I use Lightroom. So the colour space that I use is Adobe RGB. So once we've set our processing software up to use that, we can do the same inside a camera. The different cameras, you can set it up in different ways. I'm using a Canon 5D Mark IV, but whether you're using a Fuji, Nikon, Sony or whatever it is, you will be able to set the colour space inside your camera. Just have to have a look at your manual to show you how to do that. But let me show you how I do it on the Canon to start with. Okay, so on the back of the camera, we simply go into our menu settings, and then I know it's difficult to see because it's on the vertical format, but basically we've got a number of different settings that we can use inside the camera. We'll come back to white balance in a minute, but what we want to look at the moment is our colour space. So if we click on colour space, you'll see down here that we've got two settings. We've got sRGB and we've got Adobe RGB. Now sRGB does have its uses, don't get me wrong, because sRGB is kind of an industry standard that is used on colour monitors and a lot of printing processes as well. But Adobe RGB gives us a wider amount of colours that we can capture and we can work with. And since Photoshop can work with it, why wouldn't we work with it in our camera? If we set it up on sRGB now, we're throwing away lots of colours that we may want to work with in processing. So we're going to use Adobe RGB. So that's selected. There are some other things we can set up as well, but for this photograph, I'm just going to leave the colour for now set on auto white balance. But we're going to get into white balance in a minute and what that means and how we can set it and use it in our photographs. I'm pleased with the composition of this photograph. Being able to align the gap in the wall with the side-lit tree in the midground has created interconnecting elements giving depth to the scene. I wish the carpet of bluebells had extended further forward, but you can't control everything. The auto white balance seems to have done a reasonable job. So what if you want to take more control? You don't have to rely on the auto white balance. Next, we'll look at some of the presets that you can use. So I'm not sure if this is coming out very well, but basically, depending on your own camera and your own setup, then different cameras have different ways of showing the white balance. On my camera, it's on this little screen here, and it's very easy to set. We just press the white balance button, and then it gives us the ability to cycle through them. So we can go through sunshine, we can go through in the shade, we can go through cloud, we can go through tungsten lighting, fluorescent lighting, flash, a custom white balance setting, and we can dial in our own Kelvin setting. And Kelvin, I'm not going to go into it today, but basically that's a measure of color temperature. So let's take a few of those and we'll show you what each one is. So I'm going to finally compose the pictures later on, but just for the sake of taking this picture now, okay, so that's my first picture taken at auto white balance. So let's go through the next one, and this is for sunny, cloudy, tungsten, fluorescent, flash, custom, and Kelvin we won't bother taking, because unless we set those up specifically, it's going to make no real difference. So I've put those up on the screen as I've cycled through them, so you've been able to see what the difference is. So for this picture, I'm just going to take it using sunny and leave it at that, I think. So let me set the camera up properly. I'm still a bit old school. I'll never change. I like using cable release. So cable release on. Checking on the live view. Focusing about a third into the frame. Make sure the camera's nice and level. Zoom out a little bit, I think, just to give me a little bit more space around the frame should I need it. And then F11, we'll bracket from 25th of a second down, mark a frame in front of the picture. And that's it. Photograph's in the bag. The sun was well above the horizon now, hardly a cloud in the sky. The sunny or daylight setting proved to be a good choice. Once again, I'm pleased with the feeling of depth in this photo. I enjoy hazy conditions, morning light kissing distant tors and moorland. I arranged the composition so the tree in bloom had separation from the others and drew your eye into the picture. So fortunately for us, the world very rarely conforms to what we expect it to do and expected norms. So just in the time that I've been out this morning, the sun has completely changed position. It's now getting high up in the sky. In fact, it's a bit high for landscape photography, to be honest. But it's changing temperature as well. So we can't use just one colour balance setting. Yes, we can put the camera on auto and let it decide on what we want it to do, but sometimes, like when shooting bluebells or things like this, when we want that extra special bit of control over it, we might want to set it up manually. So there's a couple of ways we can do that. We could dial in a manual Kelvin setting, but to do that we'd kind of have to know what the conditions are now. And if we don't know what they are right away, then there's no way that we can really work out exactly what it is we're trying to achieve. But there is another way. We can use something in the frame to use as a reference point. Okay, so I may look like a complete lunatic having zoomed in and looked at photographing my Lee filters case. The only reason I do that is because I keep a white card in the front of here. And all that card is it gives me something which I know to be white in the frame that I can use as a reference point to photograph. Now, I could make it harder myself. I could put this in a picture. I could take a photograph of it, then take it away and take another one and use that reference one in processing to set it up as well. But there's a far easier way to do it inside camera. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this photograph now of this filter case, and then we're going to use a setting within the camera to set up its own custom white point, and we can recompose and then take our photograph. So let me show you how I do that. So all cameras are different, but basically on the Canon, the 5D Mark IV that I'm using, I can go into my menu settings and I'm able to pick up the white balance screen. So at the moment it's in auto white balance. So if I first of all go into take custom white balance, it will allow me to display an image which I can use to set it from. But at the moment we don't have an image in there to use. So let's go back in and take this photograph. All we need to do is basically compose on the photograph as we would normally. Now I want to keep myself out of the frame, so I'm using the cable release so that I'm not in it. And then we can take our, we can focus on there. Exposure's about right. Okay, so what I've basically done now is I've got a number of different reference pictures that I can work from. I took a few in the end because the exposure wasn't quite right, and it is important that you expose it. If you don't get the exposure right, this is either going to be completely blown out and there'll be no information there for the camera to use, or it's going to start turning grey, which isn't really what we're after. Incidentally, grey isn't too bad. You could use a grey card for this as well. So the next bit is to dial that information into the camera. So let me show you how we do that. So I'm not sure if it's coming over on the back of the screen too well or not, but basically we go back into our menu setting, we pick up our custom white balance, and then it will start to show pictures that we can use for it. Now I know the last one was about right, so we can go into that one and then we can click on set, use white data from this image for custom white balance, click on OK. Set white balance to dum dum dum. So we can go into a white balance setting. There we go. We set that to custom white balance. Now we can compose our photograph. Right, let's have a look at that then. Okay, so let's see if we can get this composition back how we wanted it. In fact, I'm going to take a few different compositions and I'll show you the best one. But just for information, I'm shooting at about f8, 2/50th of a second. In this case, I think the custom white balance has worked well. I like the feeling of warmth that has been retained from the original scene. In the end, I settled on including the whole tree. The carpet of bluebells in the foreground and more understated tree in the background adds a little depth. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. I really do hope you found it useful and got something out of it and got some different ideas, and I've certainly enjoyed taking the photographs. It's a lovely spot to be out on Dartmoor today. It's fantastic weather. I'm not going to go home just yet. I'm going to have a little bit of breakfast and sit with Ruby and enjoy the sunshine. I've got a few more compositions to take, and if you've got time, stick around, subscribe, ring the bell icon, and maybe watch some more videos whilst you're here. So until next time, I've got a few more to take, some breakfast to have, and I'll see you somewhere in my next video.